I'm here with Henawa Ormsby, who is the chair of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, and Dr. Nick Peat, who is the chief executive of the council. Kia ora to both of you, and thanks for joining me.
Good, Andrew. Thank you for having us.
Now, you've just held a meeting, and judging by the emotions on display there, it was quite a tough meeting. This was you received the report from the Hawke's Bay Independent Flood Review Panel. Just tell me what you make of the report and what did it feel like hearing those things? Because some of the things were some of the findings were things you knew, but also they did speak about some failings there as well. What was your view on the report?
It was a momentous meeting for us today. For councillors, it was almost an occasion where we received a taonga, a gift, a guide that's been collected on behalf of our community, of those impacted. And so we felt the aroha of that coming through the report. We felt that the job that this panel did was exactly what we asked them to do, to be independent, to be open and transparent, and to report back key learnings, findings that could be digestible for anyone in our community to pick up and understand. So they definitely went above and beyond in their role, and we thank them for that. I guess receiving the report and receiving the findings of those of the recommendations, we need to take away, we need to absorb as a council, and we also need to track forward what are our next steps. So we'll have that in a public session at our next council meeting in August. But today was ultimately to acknowledge our community, to acknowledge the panel and the work that they have brought us, and the responsibility we now have to take those next steps forward with our community. So it was very emotional, it was very momentous, and I think that's what was felt in the room today. And I have to say that that's what it deserves. That's what our community deserves when we go back out to them to communicate what this means, what it means for decisions of the community and decisions of our council. When we talk about flood resilience for our mokopuna, when we talk about flood resilience and the cost it has to our communities, the cost to our country, and also how are we going to adapt to climate change, knowing we're going to have more frequent and large events above and beyond the primary system of protection that we have of 1 in 100 year level flood.
Yeah.
And how are we going to control that water? It needs somewhere to go. We live on floodplains, and that water wants to reclaim its place on the plains. So those are very, very hard and challenging conversations that we need to have. But this report shines a light on where those issues are, what types of conversations we need to have, where we need to have them. And it is a taonga that we can take away and say, there's a hell of a lot of work for us to do, because the legacy that we've inherited in planning for flood protection is not going to serve us well in the next 100 years going forward.
It's very technical, and there were two things from what I saw. It was that some of the flood protections weren't in the right place, and also the systems failed as well. Now, are you going to implement every single thing that they suggest?
So I just want to make a point that was up front in that report, that this was the largest flood on record in New Zealand ever. So yes, a 1 in 100 level year system is not going to cope with Cyclone Gabrielle. And we know that we are going to get more events like that, super events. So we need to plan for the super backup system.
And just to add to that, Andrew, around 22 of those recommendations are already underway in some shape or form. So things like rebuilding the telemetry network, making that more resilient, immediate flood repairs, how we display flood information on our website and so on. Quite a lot of those recommendations were underway before the panel reported.
Because you are the person that's going to have to implement all these, Nick. And one thing, as often with these reviews and investigations, there wasn't any blame really. There was sort of blame on the failings of the council as a whole. But should there be some accountability? Are you, as chief executive, going to be looking at individuals and departments and that maybe didn't live up to their role and maybe could have done better?
For me, what the report really says is it's more systemic. It's not so much about individual people. It's about systems that we used inside the council and have used for the last 20 to 30 years around flood protection, that with a changing climate, those systems are going to need to change and evolve. So for me as the chief executive, it's about getting those systems right first and foremost. And once we've done that, it's also then fitting the human capability to it. I don't think a thing the size of a cyclone ends up on any one individual's desk. What a cyclone does do is it ruthlessly exposes how well systems work. And I think if you look at the report, it talks a lot about the legacy systems that we've been building since the 1800s in order to protect land. And stop banks and things will still be really important. They're our first line of defence. What the cyclones told us is what are our second and third lines of defence once those first lines are breached.
Because climate change isn't a new thing. Surely you have been evolving your how you do things and the stop banks and everything like that. This isn't really a surprise, So why suddenly are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater, if you like, and changing everything? Surely you've known these things have been coming.
So certainly we factor climate change into things like stop bank design. So stop banks have a certain amount of freeboard on top of them. And the 500-year flood protection for Taradale, which really came into its own during this flood in protecting Taradale and Napier, was the first part of a response to a changing climate for us. There were a bunch more of those 1 in 500-year banks ready to be built, but the cyclone arrived before we could construct them.
Yeah.
What I think we haven't factored in is, if you look at somewhere like the Heretaunga Plains, what do you do with that excess water once it's got over the top of flood banks? And as Chair Hinawaya said, that's going to be a really, really significant community conversation because those areas are, densely settled with people and intensive agriculture. So we've got to figure out, within that landscape, how do we deal with that water?
Now, obviously, the big issue is cost as well. So if you implemented every single one of those recommendations, what sort of cost are you looking at?
Well, we haven't done that piece of work yet, but we know it looks huge. I guess I reflect on how we were able to afford for the ratepayers the upgrade of the Taradale Stop Bank. Now, that was a co-investment partnership with the Crown as part of a regional sectors approach, all the regional councils around the country, to put forward their most flood resilience projects. And obviously with the Crown, there are always conditions and criteria that need to be met. We we underwent that work at pace when COVID response funding became available for these programs, and we were successful in a whole lot of projects.
So it was
And
the
that,
growth fund, wasn't it?
yes, it started as the Provincial Growth Fund, yes.
Yeah.
And then there was funding diverted to COVID response fast track projects.
Yeah.
And that enabled us to build the Taradale Stock Bank within 11 months with an investment from the government at around 78%. So if we are to build resilience quickly in our flood protection infrastructure, we can't do it alone. The ratepayer affordability we know is hard. We've all been through an LTP, and it is going to be tough to get everything we need to implement the recommendations. But the piece of work right in front of us now is to look at what can we afford, are we capable in doing immediately, and obviously some underway, and what are those long-term avenues where we can seek co-investment with the government. Now, the regional sector have already been successful in the Before the Deluge 2.0, which looks at co-funding for projects around the country. And given we as Hawke's Bay have already had 250 million total in investment through the NIWI projects to get Category 2C back to 1, we feel we've got a job to do immediately there before we rejoin the regional sector to say, here are our next resilience projects in our next steps. So that's a little bit of history around flood resilience funding and the need to co-invest with the government to be able to achieve all of those outcomes.
Now, at the moment, it must feel like the hits keep on coming, because you've got this, and then you've had Wairau as well, where people are saying that council didn't listen to them for years, ignored advice, all that sort of thing. There is a rapid review being done by the government, and I think you've also got your own review coming up into that. Do you think, when it comes to flooding and these sort of events, A, have you done your job as a council? And B, do you need to apologise for Cyclone Gabrielle, for your response to Cyclone Gabrielle, and for your response to the Wairau floods?
So I'll kick off first. So today's receiving the report from the independent panel was about Cyclone Gabrielle.
Yeah.
And its impacts from Wairau down to Porangahau. So that's what today's work was about. And of that, it recognised that Hawke's Bay Regional Council did not cause the flood. The cyclone caused the flood.
Yeah.
But we understand, and I understand personally, what it feels like to have lost your home, have lost your belongings, and for that, our deepest aroha to all those people impacted.
Yeah.
In terms of Wairau, and I'll let Dr. Nick Peake talk to the reviews, but for Wairau, obviously there's a legal process underway at the moment, and we need to make sure that that we let that process run. So our comment is limited around that.
Yeah.
But the same thing with this event in Wairau is our absolute aroha and devastation for that community, given it's the second time, within 2 years, and the vulnerability of where Wairau is and the challenges it will face like the rest of us across the region, it is going to be significant when it comes to how do we deal with these massive floods, weather events, cyclone, as we move forward. And as a regional leader, my job right now is to understand, and our council to understand the findings of the current reviews for Wairoa. We've asked for those independent reviews to be commissioned. Our job is also to continue to support Wairoa in as many things as we can. And it's also a leader's job to work with Wairoa District Council, tātou te Wairoa in that community, on flood protection, flood mitigation going forward in those improvements. So Wairoa has $70 million allocated to finding a solution for 600 homes in North Clyde to take them back to a 1 as soon as possible. We're a part of that work. And now what we have is an issue with the latest flood around how the river is managed to the mouth. So our job as governors and leaders is to stand up for that community and work on those solutions going forward. In terms of the reviews, I'll just hand over to Dr. McPeak.
I think the Chair's covered that really well. The only other thing I'd say about flood protection is that flood mitigation, we get lots of times during a year when we get heavy enough rain that the stop banks and systems around the region are quietly called into action, and we just don't notice because that's what they do. So they serve an absolutely critical purpose. Or lots of smaller rain events would be causing us to be wet. When you get a Wairoa situation or the cyclone, it's absolutely critical for me in my role to understand what happened well, what might be improved, because that's how we create a more robust future.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned having discussions with the council and other groups and that. I understand that there is some tension between you and the council, the Wairoa District Council, and I understand that there's possibly been some tense conversations with the mayor and text messages and that. Is that correct? What is the relationship like with the mayor and his council of Wairoa?
I mean, when this event happened, making direct contact with the mayor, the deputy mayor, was really important. Unfortunately, I couldn't get there the first day, but I got there the third day. And on the third day, it was about complete support for Wairoa. It was about talking about the future, looking to the future. And obviously there were meetings after that fronting the council to listen to how the community is doing. The media sometimes doesn't help with those relationships. And I think moving forward, we can only do what we need to for the best of that community. And so our door is always open. That's what I say often to the leadership of Wairoa, is the door is always open, because what is most important are our communities of the region and us working together. Solving these magnificent problems in the long term needs joined up leadership, and our door is still open for that.
Yeah. Now, you've got a lot going on, because you've also had the LTP, which some might say has been quite a fractured process. There has been some division on the council. We had 3 councillors voting against it. How has that, and we've also had the public, some members of the public in some sectors react quite strongly against you. How has that affected your relationship with the community and your relationship within the council, your relationships?
Well, I think of all the turmoil over the last term and maybe last term as well. We had the Napier 2020 floods, we had COVID, we had Cyclone Gabrielle, and now we have Wairoa. So to think that this has been a BAU environment, you'd be kidding yourself. So that's the first thing I like to recognise is the stress, I guess the grief that our communities have gone through, and obviously is reflected through our councillors as representatives of those communities. And I do take note that, yes, it's a challenge to respect actually diverse points of views, which is what you're alluding to with how we vote. And I actually welcome that difference of opinion, that difference of how we make decisions. But essentially, we've come together and rallied as a regional council, as councillors, in a collective manner to move forward. LTP is always hard. There are trade-offs every which way. And I think it would be irresponsible for us as elected members and leaders of our constituents if we weren't to have differing views that represent our communities.
Because there have been some decisions that you've made, despite receiving overwhelming support, overwhelming written opposition to it, talking about the land values to capital values and those sort of things. I'll ask you first, Hinawai, are you happy with the advice that your chief executive is giving you? And Nick, I'll ask you, are you happy with the advice you've given them, and do you believe you should continue in your role?
So I'll take that first.
Yeah.
So I reflect, and I can't believe we're going back to revenue and finance policy, by the way, but we will.
Well, it's still an issue.
So I'll take us back even further. So 18 months before that decision was made, and I have to recall, it's probably not the most exciting 18 workshops over 18 months to have.
Yeah.
But and we had a cyclone in the middle of that. We set a path of the revenue and financing policy review that had never been done before. So for 20 years, our rates had not been looked at and updated on who should benefit, who exacerbates the problem, where are the outcomes, and from a principled level that had never been reviewed before. So I just want to put that across the where's our responsibility fit for purpose rating system. That's the first thing. We had Philip Jones, who's renowned and absolutely loves his job, going around every country facilitating their rates review.
Yep.
So we had an independent part of those workshops. He ran those with our finance staff, with our CEO, which started with James. Then we had Petey, who took over, we had Bill, and now we have Nick, right? So this is a long history of what a rates review looks like. And the first stage of that rates review, not to bore you too much, is around the principle. And then we look at the outliers in stage 2. So over 18 workshops, we thoroughly work through every line item of rate that we have. And as a council, everyone fully engaged. And Philip Jones actually commented at the end of the process that we were the most engaged council he's ever come across.
So are you happy with that?
So I'm talking to the process, right? So I'm talking to the process.
But are you happy with the advice that you've received from your chief executives? Not just Nick sitting next to you, but...
Of course, because in every workshop, we as elected members with a voice have the opportunity to ask for more. And if we ask for more, we get more at the workshop.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with us voicing what concerns we have and what work we want brought back, and that happening. Yeah. There's no problem there.
Yeah. Okay. And Nick, do you feel that the advice you and your predecessors have given the council has been the correct advice?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you go through, as Chair Hinawai said, an enormously robust process.
Yeah.
And you explore every nook and cranny, be it revenue and financing policy or any other issue. And I will always look to provide councillors both with advice, but also choices about the way that they head forward. So, yep. Look, I'm hugely proud to lead the operational part of the organisation.
Yeah. So now sometimes the government can step in and put a commissioner in place of a council. It hasn't reached that stage yet. Do you have confidence in the decision making of your council that will never be a consideration? Anyway.
Oh, I'm 100% confident that a commission is not needed. I guess what you're saying, Andrew, is what's come about, particularly with Wairoa. So we've heard a lot from that event.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, whatever is found at the end of the reviews, we will take forward. But from a governance sense, this is not a governor's decision in terms of operations. So I guess that rumour or suggestion actually doesn't make sense for the council and myself to stand down or for a commissioner to come in. So I'd be, from a legal sense, I'd be very surprised if there was any truth in that.
You have had some of your councillors, your deputy chair, apologise to his community. How are things there? I mean, are you and your councillors talking about these things? Are relations good between you?
Yeah, and I'll go back to probably the disasters we've been through and how we can manage going forward. I think within any council dynamic, we have 11 councillors, strong councillors, well-voiced councillors, as you know.
Some with very strong voices.
Yeah. And I would never restrict those strengths and qualities. Yeah. But what we do need to do is a bit of work internally around actually a refresh around how effective we are in our structure and governance, and how we best support moving forward with all the moving parts. I mean, the number of reviews that follow disasters on top of BAU can actually be quite overwhelming. But look, I'm really proud of how our council's performed so far. Yeah. Most councils would have fallen apart by now, but that's not the way that we intend to be or the direction we're heading. We're nowhere near that. We just need to regroup and actually strategize a bit better on taking different portfolios and responsibilities. So that's a piece of work we're doing next week.
Okay. Now, from the governance point of view, Hinawai, and Nick, you from an operational point of view, can you assure the public that you are listening to them?
Absolutely. Our LTP reflected that.
Okay, some would say it doesn't, but yeah, you stand by it.
Yes.
Yeah. Nick?
And look, it's integral to what we do in delivering services right across the region. We can always get better at the way we work with communities. But when I talk to staff on a daily basis, what they talk to me about is the last conversation they've had, whether they're involved in killing possums, controlling weeds, or building flood protection.
Yeah. Now, a lot of what we've been talking about is doom and gloom. Are you positive about anything going forward?
Oh, I was so pleased to have received today's report. Absolutely. It means we've got better sight on the type of work to do, and it's different. It's got to be different. And that is a great challenge. So I'm looking forward to this piece of work that we need to do. And just reflecting back on your questions around do we listen? I think we just have to do better at having different avenues to listen, because I reflect on trying to get across everyone in our community, in our region, and that's a hard task, but we just have to I think we have to be more strategic around how we do it. So that's an exciting piece of social structural work that my councillors want to get our hands on.
Do you mean that? What just off the top of your head, what are some of the things you could be doing differently?
I think, you know, if we look at the capacity of staff and councillors, also teaming up better with our TAs, and with mana whenua, and it's always evolving, and it's always a journey to do better around how we get collective groups together to work towards common goals. And I guess that's a bit of the rub with the mandate of the regional council, of our district council fellows across the region, of also mana whenua and their settlement process. So we see that play out again, over many committees. And, you know, I just think of the future development strategy at the moment, there's tensions there. So I just think we can do better on how to get common outcomes. And so that social structure work can always be improved on. And I think that's where we need to take our communities with a co-design of greater flood resilience, and where should water go after the first line of defence fails.
Hinawai Ormsby and Dr. Nick Peake, thank you so much for your time and for being straightforward with some interesting questions. But I do appreciate your time, and all the best for the future. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity to talk again.
Okay, kia ora, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.